something is happening in America right now that actually does not fit our mental models. It certainly doesn't fit the mental models of a lot of people on TV. It doesn't fit the mental models of a lot of people in the parties. It doesn't fit our cultural mental models. You have someone talking about, in a way we have not heard, genuine, deeper democracy, popular movements, human equality in a meaningful way, and a politics of love in the tradition of Dr. King, and winning elections in America, the United States of America. And I just have to say, and I've been encouraged watching you on air talk about your own rethinking of things, which I think we all have to do to be in this work. You know, I think this is a wake-up moment for the American power establishment. From Michael Bloomberg to those of us in the media, to the Democratic Party, to donors, to CEOs, many in this establishment are behaving, in my view, as they face the prospect of a Bernie Sanders nomination, like out-of-touch aristocrats in a dying aristocracy. Just sort of, how do we stop this? How do we block this? And there is no curiosity. Why is this happening? What is going on in the lives of my fellow citizens in this country that they may be voting for something that I find it so hard to understand? What is happening? What is happening? This is a moment for curiosity in America. And I think about this network, which I love, which you love, and I think we have to look within also. Why is a lobbyist for Uber and Mark Zuckerberg on the air many nights explaining a political revolution to us? Why is Chris Matthews on this air talking about the victory of Bernie Sanders, who had kin murdered in the Holocaust, and analogizing it to the Nazi conquest of France? The people who are stuck in an old way of thinking, in 20th century frameworks, in gulag thinking, are missing what is going on. It is time for all of us to step up, rethink, and understand the dawn of what may be, frankly, a new era in American life.
Well, you know, and I don't know who the lobbyist is, but I will defend my friend Chris Matthews that I don't think that he was trying to make it a sort of, you know, anti-Jewish sort of, you know, disparagement of Mr. Sanders. I think that what Chris, who I've known for a long time, I think what he's speaking to is that there is like a cultural revulsion to the idea of socialism among people of Chris's generation. You know, I hear it a lot, and it's interesting to me that for a lot of people, it's reflexive. It's you know, they grew up with the anti-USSR, you know, conditioning of this country post-World War II. That is who we always were. Even myself as a Gen Xer, we grew up doing the drills. I grew up in Colorado where we were 50 feet from ground zero until we will be nuked if Russia, you know, bombed us. So I think and you know that in America people merge communism and socialism into sort of one big bad other. And so I wouldn't, you know, go there with Chris. But I will say this. I think that one of the biggest tricks, one of the greatest tricks ever pulled on the world is for really rich people to convince the world that just being really rich made you superior to other people and got everyone to buy it, right? They got poor people to buy it. You know, Donald Trump is only known because people thought he was rich. They weren't even sure he was rich. He didn't even confirm he was rich. But all he had to do was seem rich, and he could get to host a TV show. We had a thing called Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous when I was growing up. People eagerly watched other rich people just live their lives in their homes and thought that was amazing. We have Real Housewives, and we watch people we perceive as rich walking around. Rich people have managed to do that, and while we're all watching them entertain us, they are taking the courts. They've taken Citizens United. They've taken our politics. They've taken this country. Donald Trump isn't out there helping working class people. He's making them broke while they are worshiping rich people who are getting rich. And so it is a trick. And I wonder if you think that maybe the Bloomberg on the one end of the spectrum and Bernie on the other is a sign that the spell is broken. That maybe people are like, hold on a second. Rich people aren't giving me anything. You know, and then even Donald Trump saying, I'll give you racism, I'll give you racism. It isn't working anymore.
That's so well put. I will tell you this. When I wrote Winners Take All, which you showed, the heart of the book, my editor once asked me, what is this book about in one word? And I was like, this is a book about moves. This is a book about the dance moves that rich people pull off, the twirls and dives they pull off to make us think. They are saving us. They are our saviors. From the very problems they are still working hard to cause, right? So to take a couple of those moves. One is, I make problems right? As I'm Michael Bloomberg, I make my entire fortune selling terminals and technology to the financial sector, which is the industry that has done the most to destroy opportunity in America for regular people. And then I have the gall to turn around and rich-splain myself as the savior to the problem I'm still profiting from causing. Another move is this kind of intelligence thing, like this idea that being rich gives you general purpose intelligence, that if you succeed at create a social network because you're too socially awkward to meet girls in person, you are now an authority on public school education. You should be in charge of rethinking that. That's another move. But in this election, you are actually seeing, and you're completely right about the spell breaking. This is not about particular candidates. This is actually not about Bernie. This is not about Michael Bloomberg. This is about 40 years of a neoliberal paradigm maybe breaking, maybe shattering, maybe people waking up to it. And a lot of us in the media are the last to know. I have been on the trail and seen all these white guys in camo, as I've described before on this network, in the middle of a Bernie Sanders rally who do not look like socialists. And I verify, in fact, are you a socialist? No, not a socialist. Hate those socialists. Why are you at this rally? Because Bernie's fighting for me. There is something happening in this country where people are actually not fooled by the idea that Joseph McCarthy was trying to kind of worry us about. They don't think this is going to be the next domino to fall in the Cold War, in part because the Cold War is over. And they realize that what democratic socialism means, which is actually really social democracy, is just America joining the rest of the advanced world to make sure regular people are not dying on the street of the flu, are getting a decent education to flourish, and are living the kind of life we think we are living in a country where we say we have the American dream.
Yeah, I mean, the last people maybe who will find out will be the Trump voter, who will maybe eventually figure out that all they're getting are baubles too, and that there's nothing in it for them. They're not going to get anything. They may be the last to find out. People of color are usually the first to find out because we've always been told you ain't getting nothing, but we're saying now, now that we have equality, that's not a mask that you can really even hand to white people where they're like, at least I get better citizenship. Well, now you get nothing. And I think, I agree with you. I think there is something happening where people are waking up to the fact that rich folks might have been lying to them. It's always great to talk with you. Oh, no, keep staying, stay, because I'm just going to add some more people to the conversation. Stay with me, Anand. I want to add Jonathan Capehart to the conversation. He's an MSNBC contributor and opinion columnist for the Washington Post. Back with me, Teresa Kumar, who's the president of Voto Latino. Karine Jean-Pierre from MoveOn.org. She's the author of Moving Forward. We got a lot of authors coming on today. And Tiffany Cross, resident fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School. Everybody just feel free to jump in. We were keeping Anand as well. What do you make of that? Jonathan, I'll bring you in since this is your first appearance today on the show. What do you make of that? Because it does feel like rich people have been able to really trick people for a long time. You go all the way back to, you go back to Michael Bloomberg. What was stop and frisk? It was trying to move away the poor people who were in the way of gentrification. So I want Brooklyn back, and I'm going to move rich people in. But now we got to get rid of all these brown and black poor people and move them away so that they're not bothering the rich people. They go together. People are figuring this stuff out. Do you think that's what's helping Bernie Sanders and hurting Bloomberg? Or is it hurting him, John?
It's probably helping Bernie Sanders. But I have to say two things before I give you my full answer, and it's disclosures. One, I worked for Mike Bloomberg on his first campaign for mayor as policy advisor. And two, my husband currently is working on the Bloomberg campaign. So I put that out there so everyone knows, and if you read my writing, you know this already. So now I'll answer your question. The problem I have with Anand's piece in the New York Times, which is well argued, and I respect the argument that it's making, I kept thinking while reading it, what happens to people when they make money? It's as if, for Anand's argument, that once you cross over the threshold from millionaire to billionaire, that you suddenly become evil, malevolent. There are untold numbers of wealthy people who are Democrats, who believe in the things that we talk on your show every week, who believe in equality, who are doing everything possible to balance level the playing field. And the comparison between President Trump and Mayor Bloomberg, I think, is rather disingenuous. One, President Trump had never served in public office before becoming president of the United States. And I could understand, and to your point, Joy, about bringing up stop and frisk, the reason why we can talk about it is because as mayor, Mike Bloomberg supported that policy, ran that policy, but he also ran for public office 3 times and won. He has been held accountable by actual voters. And so when you're looking at the campaign of Mike Bloomberg versus, say, the other billionaire we think in the race on the other side, Donald Trump, you have actually a whole, pardon the pun, wealth of information to look at when trying to determine whether Mike Bloomberg, as president of the United States, if he were to even get the nomination, would be somebody who would be a malevolent actor in the White House, who would be corrupt. And the other thing is, over 12 years as mayor of New York City, leave aside the policies that were damaging and hurtful and harmful, but to Anand's point in his piece, he was talking about corruption. There is no corruption in the 12 years of a Bloomberg administration, financial corruption or anything like that. I think we need to have a much more balanced conversation here, because in the end, the reason why Mike Bloomberg has been rising in the polls isn't just the fact that he's spending untold millions of dollars on his presidential campaign. It's because there are people who are looking at him as the person who could vanquish Donald Trump. Let's not forget that Donald Trump, for a lot of people, is an existential threat, and folks like my mother look at him as the guy who could take out Trump.
Joe, can I just briefly respond to that?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
You know, first of all, it's Anand. Rhymes with almond.
My apologies.
And look, you know, Jonathan's a writer I respect a lot, but it is not lost on me that a very high fraction of people who defend Michael Bloomberg in public have at some point been paid by Michael Bloomberg, or had someone in their family paid by Michael Bloomberg, or their city received money from Michael Bloomberg. This is a crucial part of the Bloomberg strategy, and I think it's not an accident. Tom Friedman recently made, you know, a column paging Michael Bloomberg has to disclose Michael Bloomberg's funding my wife's museum. So this is the appearance of corruption, even if it's not a corrupt act. I'm not accusing anybody.
Hold on. Let me.
Anand, that's unfair.
No, I know. Yeah, you're right. Because the other thing is,
can I just finish my point? Because Jonathan questioned my argument, and you know, I'm happy to send Jonathan a copy of Winners Take All. It is precisely written for the question he asked, which is, aren't there some good ones? Aren't there some billionaires who are better than others? They're not all Trump. I agree with that. But the argument that I make carefully, and I'm happy to send him a copy, is that even the good ones are part of a generational theft in this country that has seen the top 1% add to their wealth by $21 trillion, and the bottom 50% lose $1 trillion of wealth in that period. And the good ones and the bad ones have all, in different ways, participated in that. If you use a tax haven, as Michael Bloomberg does in Bermuda, you are part of that. If you have made money from the financialization of the American economy, you have been part of that. So everybody does not have to be Donald Trump to be part of the problem of plutocracy. Plutes are going to plute, and oligarchs are going to oligarch.
But what my question, I think, for a lot of people, you know, Bernie Sanders is a millionaire. He has 3 homes. Yeah. So there is a question, I think, for a lot of people of where's the cutoff, right? Because he's a millionaire. You know, Tom Steyer is a billionaire who's given a lot of money to, you know, causes like, you know, climate change that are really important. So why isn't Bernie Sanders a plutocrat?
You know, there's a very big difference between $1 million and $1 billion. $1 million is enough money to have a very, very nice house in America. $1 billion is enough money to attempt to buy an election. Those are very, very different types of purchases. And I think we sometimes deceive people by making it seem, I mean, you know, there have been people who have been trying to call Bernie Sanders an oligarch. I mean, it's preposterous. We are in a situation in this country.
I'm not calling him an oligarch. So
no, I know, but we're in a situation in this country in which we actually know from data and facts that this country is being run for the benefit of a very small number of people, where the fruits of the future are being basketed almost entirely by a small group of people. And to claim that anybody with $1 million is doing that is just, it's not borne out by the data. We have a billionaire problem, and I want to make sure we are focused on understanding that even people who seem like the good ones, whether that's, you know, Mike Bloomberg to you, or whether that's Tom Steyer, whether that's someone who, like Bill Gates, who gives it all, Bill Gates is problematic too. Bill Gates should not have that much power over public education in America, no matter how good a man he is.
Well,
no one should.
I think no one should. But I think you're talking about right now. Yeah, no, I think you're talking right now, and you're talking about systemic flaws in the governing system. You're talking about systemic flaws of having government actually make sure that people are equitable, that they're paying their fair share into a society that allows them to actually have these fruits. And I think most of us are all in agreement with that, absolutely.
Right.
But I think that the challenge is to put Bloomberg akin to Donald Trump because he too is a billionaire, or anyone for that matter, is almost that we miss the point. The problem with Donald Trump, the problem with Donald Trump is that he is an authoritarian despot white nationalist and is a complete threat to our world order, and he uses his semblance of money to make sure that that's okay. Now, and I think that is where sometimes we get lost in the conversation. Let's be very clear. If we want to change the system, the problem is not necessarily the billionaires. The problem is that we have to actually go after our governor instructions, making sure that people pay actual taxes. We actually have to have a conversation and make sure that we scrap Citizens United. Because if we do not like the system, which we are all currently functioning in, the progressive infrastructure would not be viable against the Republican machine without those billionaires. You cannot compare a George Soros to a Donald Trump or to the Koch brothers, for that matter.
Right.
The reason that people have right now, the reason that people even question whether there is climate change and whether or not there is actual science behind it is because the Koch brothers directly funded that, making sure that people actually questioned whether that was an issue. And so I would encourage us to have a broader conversation of what are those structures that need to change fundamentally so that these billionaires come into the system where they are making sure that we don't have these high levels of inequity. When people say, well, young people, they want a free ride, they don't want a free ride. They're strapped with $1 trillion in debt, meaning that $1 trillion in student debt, they can never possibly buy a home. They don't have a shot at the American dream the way our current system is structured. But it's not dissimilar. That's exactly where we were 100 years ago when we had the Rockefellers, when we had all these the McCarthy, not the McCarthys, I'm thinking the other one, but when we had the same type of billionaire class in the millionaire scope, and we had to come to a moment of how are we going to invest and nation build in our whole economy so that we make sure that we have a thriving middle class, and that we do not have right now.
Tiffany, because what I can't. Yeah, absolutely. But can I ask you a question? But you can say what you want to say, but because I don't know if you're seeing this too, but what I'm seeing, despite all of this conversation we're having, is the people who are running up to me in the airport and saying, oh my God, can't Michael Bloomberg just beat Trump, are black women. That's what I'm seeing, is a lot of black women being the ones who are the most attracted to the idea of him as a potential savior. And then I will let you go ahead and make your comment.
Yeah, I think, and thank you, that question was a perfect segue, but I think, I take everybody's point, I take Maria's point, but I do think there is a sect in society, particularly among people of color, who do look at Donald Trump and Mike Bloomberg in the same category. These are two wealthy white men who, sometimes masquerade their desire to lead as more of a desire to rule. And when you have these kind of draconian policies being instituted.
Tiffany,
let me just finish, Maria. I totally get your point. Let me just make my point, Maria, please. So, Maria, can I make my point? I'm not disagreeing with you. I just want to finish my thought. Thanks. So I take the point that these are two different people, but I'm saying not everybody is sitting around on Sunday reading the New York Times op-ed pages to get that nuanced argument. And so for people who are not following or consuming the minutia of this, there is, and I'm not saying this is my view, I'm saying this is how some people view it. So to Maria's point, yes, we have to look at the difference between these two men. They are not the same people, but does perception matter, or does reality, is where reality and perception meet? And to your point, Anand, about Bernie Sanders, the difference between Bernie Sanders and, being a millionaire and Mike Bloomberg being a billionaire, to the person who has nothing, there's not a big difference between them either. To the person who's making $30,000, $20,000 a year, they don't see the big financial tax bracket difference between these two men. All they see are these are the haves and I am the have-nots.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's true. And I want to make sure Karine gets in too, because Karine, because you were, MoveOn.org, it started out as a movement that was like an email list about not impeaching a very popular president for nothing, right? Because Republicans, but when you go behind the reason Republicans wanted him gone, it was about the idea that having a Democrat in place would allow a Democrat to fill the courts. For Republicans, it's all about that one thing. And we think of the court fight being about abortion. But for Republicans, it's mostly about plutocracy. It's mostly about shoveling more resources into the hands of the very rich. So much of the fights that we have, so many of the fights we have seem to be about one thing, but they're always about money. And the Republican Party is a concentrated machine for funneling money to the very rich and corporations. They fool us with all these other social issues to keep us occupied. That's my opinion. Let me allow you in.
No, I agree with you 110%, Joy. Look, first of all, I respect and love everybody on this panel. Let's start off saying that. You know, I think about just going back to billionaires and the role that they play. We have to remember billionaires, they bought the economy and it crashed in 2008. And who had to pay for that? People who had to pay for that were like people like my parents who lost almost everything, lost a home. And that is the thing to remember. It trickles down to the very people that we're talking about who are trying to get out of the situation that we're in with Donald Trump. And now you have a billionaire who's trying to buy an election. And guys, we have to be really honest about this. That is what Bloomberg is doing. He came in late. And he put in hundreds of millions of dollars on TV. And it's not that people are giving him a pass, it's that he's controlling the narrative. And what happened for the first time last week on the debate stage is that he was questioned. He was pushed. And he had to answer for stop and frisk. He had to answer for NDAs. And so that is what's happening. And I have to go back to stop and frisk for a minute because that was incredibly disingenuous the way that Bloomberg is spinning this. He's a data guy. He doesn't leave his house without knowing what foot to put first. He knew that policy was bad. He knew it. He knew he was hurting people and he continued it. The courts had to stop him. It ruined many, many lives. And so that is something that I had to say. It's just a disingenuous argument and apology.
Very quickly, I want to get Jonathan in and then let Anand have a last word. But Jonathan, how does he work? I mean, an apology is an apology, but you know, to Karine's point, he's got a lot of baggage. But black people seem to be open to it. It is confusing to me.
Right. Well, you know, my mom's going to kill me by sharing this conversation after I told her I wouldn't. But it was the perfect distillation of why she still, after watching the debate, she said she was still leaning towards Bloomberg, but she also, her heart's kind of with Biden. But Vice President Biden, he's such a nice guy. He always wants to turn the other cheek. And Bloomberg is like, what cheek? For my mother, who is a 78-year-old woman who grew up in the segregated South in North Carolina, for her to see what is happening to this country is heartbreaking. And for her, Donald Trump is an existential threat. She wants him gone. She wants him defeated. She thinks Mike Bloomberg is the person who can do it, you know, regardless of stop and frisk, regardless of all the true harm that he caused with that policy, but she sees him as the guy with the wherewithal and the resources to hit the ground running and take Donald Trump out. That for her and for all the black women coming up to you, Joy, in airports and everywhere, that is their #1 goal. You said it yourself. Black women are the canaries in the coal mine. We should start listening to black women.
And let me give you the last word on this, Anand. Why are they wrong? Because they are, I mean, I've been sort of astounded by just the number of black women, particularly black women over 40, who have been coming up, black women over 50, over 60, really intensely clinging to Mike Bloomberg as a lifeline. Why are they wrong?
I never say voters are wrong. I think candidates may be wrong to argue the way they argue. You know, voters have all kinds of reasons to choose what they choose. I can only tell them what I think. What I'm suggesting is that these things that we're talking about Michael Bloomberg, these different things, are not unconnected. The stop and frisk, when you know better, is the smugness of the out-of-touch person who doesn't actually understand and able to see other people. And it is the smugness, this question of Michael Bloomberg is not as corrupt as Donald Trump. In a certain sense, that is absolutely true, obviously true. In another sense, the very notion of trying to win the election in the way that Bloomberg is corruption. And frankly, the attempt to purchase the presidency of the United States may be legal, but it is corruption on a scale that makes a Ukraine deal look actually quite trivial. And I think the question now is, are we going to get past the myth that I've heard in some of this discussion about the good billionaire versus the bad billionaire? We are living in a plutocracy. You either recognize that or if you don't. If you do recognize that, you think we need to make the plutocrats less powerful, all of them less powerful. And there are very few people in the plutocracy, on the left or the right or whatever they say, including George Soros, by the way, who actually want to make themselves less powerful. So if you want justice to flourish in America, you're going to have to make those people less powerful.
Yeah.
And I do not believe they are going to be the leaders of the change that displaces them and allows human flourishing to come back to this country.
Plutocracy or autocracy or social democracy. This is a very interesting time to be alive, a very terrifying, I think, in a lot of ways, time to be alive. You know, we are all friends on this show. We can disagree. It may be. We'll see. We'll see. There's not a lot of trust out there. I can tell you, black folks don't necessarily trust the system. But we'll see. It's tough. But I like the fact that we have good friends who are smart people who can come on and have these discussions, and we walk away all friends. Thank you all very much. Anand Giridharadas, appreciate you. Karine, Jean-Pierre, appreciate you.